I didn't plan to cry that day, I really didn't. Outside the ballroom, the late afternoon sun dipped behind the hills, casting a golden hue over the vineyard. The warm breeze carried the faint scent of lavender and ripening grapes. Guests were still arriving, laughter floating on the wind, mingling with the soft strains of a string quartet playing something classical, something expensive. The venue had been her dream since she was 16. My daughter always had an eye for grandeur. The draped ceilings, chandeliers shaped like cascading crystals, and tables adorned with cream roses, gold chargers, and hand-lettered name cards. She said she wanted elegance. I gave it to her. I stood near the back wall unnoticed, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee and watching her float from table to table in her ivory gown. She looked beautiful. Radiant, really. Every curl pinned just so, every move graceful. She was the center of her own constellation. And I was just a quiet star on the edge of her sky. My suit was modest. Navy blue. The same one I wore at her graduation years ago. She once told me it made me look solid. I ironed it myself that morning, careful not to miss the creases. My shoes were polished, though they'd seen better days. No one noticed. Not that they were supposed to. I didn't come to shine. I came to support, to be proud. So when her fiancé, Jason, swaggered over with that confident, practiced smile and a slice of cake in hand, I thought nothing of it at first. He always walked like he was auditioning for something. "Hey, old man," he said, voice slick as oil. "Try the dessert." I smiled politely and reached for the plate, but he didn't offer it. Instead, he dipped his hand into the cake, vanilla with raspberry filling and white fondant. I remembered paying extra for it, scooped a generous portion, and smeared it across my face. The room froze for a heartbeat. Then it burst like a balloon. Laughter erupted. Loud, unrestrained. Someone actually clapped. Phones came out, recording the moment like it was part of the show. I heard a voice, I couldn't tell who, yell, "He's a billionaire." I stood motionless. Cake slid slowly down my cheek, sticky and sweet. The sugary scent mixed with the warm air and the faint smell of rose petals. I could feel the cold of the frosting seeping into my collar. My hands were at my sides. My breath caught somewhere between my throat and my chest. And still, I didn't move. Jason laughed, leaning back like it was the best joke he'd ever told. "Relax, man. It's just a little fun. Don't look so serious." I turned toward my daughter. She stood not 10 feet away, bouquet in hand, lips parted, frozen. For a split second, her eyes met mine. Something flickered there. Regret? Embarrassment? I couldn't tell. But she didn't speak, didn't move, just looked away. I'd always known Jason didn't respect me. He spoke over me at dinners, mocked my work, once asked my daughter, in front of me, if she thought I even understood what his company did. But this was cruelty dressed in a joke. And no one stopped it. I slowly raised my napkin and dabbed my face. The texture of the linen was rough against my skin. I cleaned what I could, turned, and quietly walked to a chair in the corner near the windows, where the sunset spilled orange and amber across the floor. No one followed. The quartet resumed their melody, something from Vivaldi. The chatter returned. The party moved on, as if I were background noise, as if I hadn't just been humiliated in front of 100 people. My coffee had gone cold. I didn't touch it. I sat perfectly still, feeling the sugar dry on my skin, crusting near the corner of my jaw. My heart thudded, not fast, but heavy. Slow, as if each beat had to drag itself forward. And I remembered. I remembered the nights I worked double shifts at the factory so she could have new school supplies. The winter I skipped heating to pay for her out-of-state college tuition. The way her little fingers used to grip my hand so tight when she was scared of thunderstorms. How she'd whisper, "Don't let go." I never did. Not once. Even when she moved out and stopped calling as often. Even when Jason entered the picture and I saw the distance forming like a crack in the glass. Even when she forgot to introduce me at the rehearsal dinner. I let it go. Because I thought love was about patience. About sacrifice. But now, cake on my collar, laughter echoing in my ears, I saw the truth. I wasn't a father today. I was a prop. A necessary relic. The man who paid, but didn't belong. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly as dinner service began. Soft amber chandeliers glowed above, casting a golden sheen across clinking silverware and champagne glasses. The smell of roasted chicken and truffle oil filled the air. I stayed in my seat, alone, unseen, and in that silence, something inside me shifted, not with fury, not even with sadness, but with clarity. All of it, wasn't a mistake. It was a message. Jason didn't fear disrespecting me, because no one here respected me, not even her. And I realized, for the first time, that dignity isn't something others hand you. It's something you refuse to surrender, even if it takes you 70 years to remember that. I didn't cry. Not then. Not even when someone walked past and snickered. Instead, I looked out the window and watched the sun dip below the hills, the sky fading into shades of plum and deep indigo. The vineyards rustled gently in the breeze, whispering secrets to no one. And I whispered one back. This is the last time. The very last time I will stay silent to protect someone else's comfort while surrendering my pride. They think I'm a beggar. They forgot who I am. But they will remember. Soon. I didn't speak to anyone for the rest of the night. I just sat there, quiet, watching people laugh, dance, sip wine that I paid for. That was the part that stung the most. I was financing my own humiliation. The ballroom sparkled under crystal chandeliers, casting warm golden light over linen-draped tables topped with centerpieces of white roses and gold-rimmed glasses. Waiters in black vests moved between guests, balancing silver trays filled with hors d'oeuvres and champagne. The room smelled like polished wood, perfume, and vanilla frosting. The music had changed to a jazzy piano melody that didn't match the ache in my chest. Every time I caught a glimpse of Jason, I felt a tightening in my chest. Not quite rage. Something colder. Something heavier. It was betrayal, dressed in silk ties and cufflinks, covered in frosting. He moved through the crowd like a celebrity, smiling, shaking hands, posing for photos. His hand wrapped around my daughter's waist like he owned her. And she smiled. She giggled. He leaned in to whisper something in her ear, and she tilted her head back and laughed. That laugh used to be mine. I used to chase her around the house just to hear it, when she was still small enough to jump into my arms. Now it belonged to someone else. Someone who smeared cake across my face and called me a beggar. And she giggled. I kept hoping it was shock, that she didn't know what to say, that maybe she'd come to me later, embarrassed, and explain. But the longer I sat there, the clearer it became. This wasn't new. This wasn't a slip. Jason had always made those little comments, like the time he handed me a Christmas gift and said, "Careful, it's not a pension check." Or the time I tried to help them move apartments and he said, laughing, "Don't throw your back out, old man. We'll call you when it's time for bingo." Once, when I offered to buy them dinner, he said, "You sure you're good for it? I don't want to bankrupt you." Each time, he said it like it was just a joke. Light, casual. My daughter would roll her eyes, nudge him, say, "Jason, stop," like she was mildly amused, not offended. She never defended me. Never said, "Hey, that's not funny." Never pulled him aside later and told him to apologize. I don't think it even crossed her mind to ask how it made me feel. I remembered the first time I met him. He didn't shake my hand, just gave me a nod, barely making eye contact, like I was some background extra in their life. I asked him about his work. "Startups," he said. "You wouldn't get it." I got it just fine. I got that he thought I was beneath him, that a man who respected people didn't talk like that. I saw it in the way he held his phone while you spoke, how he smirked when someone older talked. He didn't see people. He saw usefulness. At their engagement dinner, I gave a toast. Spoke from the heart. I said how proud I was of her, how I watched her grow into the woman she is. Jason raised his glass and said, "Yeah, and now he carries the wedding bill too." The room chuckled. My daughter laughed. I laughed too, smiled like it didn't chip another piece off me. That night, I sat with frosting in the creases of my shirt collar, thinking about all the small cuts over the years. All the moments I had ignored, excused, swallowed. Like when she asked me not to wear my old watch to the ceremony. "It doesn't match the theme," she said. It was the same watch I wore to every important moment of her life. The day she was born, her first recital, her college graduation, or when she told me not to give a speech at the reception. We already have too many speakers. We're trying to keep things on schedule. Or when she asked the photographer to take more photos of her with Jason's parents. We already have tons of us, Dad. Let's mix it up. It wasn't one insult. It was a slow fade. A quiet, persistent erasure. I was being pushed to the edges of her life, pixel by pixel. The man who helped do it stood in the center of the room, his tie loosened now, sleeves rolled, laughing loudly as if nothing had happened. And still, no one came to me. Not a single person. Not the cousins I used to host every Thanksgiving. Not the uncle whose rent I once covered during a rough patch. Not even her best friend, who I once drove 6 hours in the rain to pick up when her car broke down. I was surrounded by people, and I had never felt more alone. I looked down at the tablecloth. White linen, speckled with crumbs and the smudge of cake from where I had dabbed my napkin. The candle in the center flickered, catching a tiny glint in the silver cutlery. I listened to the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of them. But I felt the heat in my chest, the weight behind my eyes. I felt the ache in my back from sitting too long, the stiffness in my fingers from holding onto too much for too many years. No one cared that I was hurting. No one even looked my way. I wondered if this is what disappearing feels like. Not all at once, but slowly, moment by moment, word by word. It wasn't just the cake. It was every unkind joke that landed like a slap. Every smile she gave him after he disrespected me. Every time I lowered my head to keep the peace. I thought I was being strong, being the bigger person. I thought I was giving her space to grow, to love, to choose her life. But I was wrong. I was giving them permission. Permission to forget what I had given up. Permission to laugh at the man who worked 2 jobs so she could go to school. Permission to erase me from the story. And still, I stayed silent. But not because I was afraid. Because I was remembering. Every small sacrifice. Every long shift. Every missed meal. Every birthday where I gave her everything and took nothing for myself. Every letter I wrote when she was away at college. Every phone call where I said, "I'm proud of you," even when she didn't ask. I remembered who I was. And I knew then, something had to change. Not for revenge. Not for drama. Not even to prove a point. But because I couldn't keep pretending I was okay with being treated like I didn't matter. Because I did matter. Even if they had forgotten. I hadn't. Not anymore. The music had shifted to something slower. Softer. The kind of melody you barely notice unless you're alone. And I was alone. All around me, the celebration carried on seamless and shining like a glossy magazine spread. Laughter danced under the high ceilings, woven with the clinking of wine glasses and the soft hum of a live quartet in the corner. Candlelight flickered from tall centerpieces, casting gentle shadows across tables draped in ivory silk. The scent of roasted duck mingled with gardenia perfume and expensive cologne. Somewhere near the bar, someone was pouring champagne again, but none of it reached me. I sat near the edge of the room, still wearing the same cake-stained blouse. The frosting had dried into the fabric like a bitter emblem. I could feel it tightening against my skin, stiff and cold. Jason strolled past again, laughing, a drink in one hand, his other arm draped casually around a groomsman's shoulders. He didn't glance my way, didn't flinch, just passed by as though I were part of the furniture. To Queen Rachel and King Jay, someone shouted, lifting a glass. The nickname landed like a slap. Jason grinned. He raised his glass in return. King Jay. He was basking in his throne, built with money I had earned. I looked across the room to my daughter, Rachel. She stood surrounded by people, smiling, the delicate crystals in her veil catching the light. She looked radiant, proud, untouched by the scene that had played out earlier. I waited for her to glance at me, to check, to say something with her eyes. She didn't. There was no hesitation in her joy. No sadness, no shame, no weight from what Jason had done. That's when I knew. This wasn't new. She'd let it happen before. Jason had been planting the seeds for a long time, with little remarks dressed as jokes. Careful, she might take coupons instead of a card. Don't worry, your mom doesn't need tech. She still uses a pen and checkbook. We'll get her a nice corner at the nursing home someday. It was always a chuckle, always a wink, but always in front of others. And Rachel never told him to stop. Not really. Maybe she'd roll her eyes, but there was no defense. No line drawn. The first time I met him, he looked me up and down and said, "Wow, you're a lot more practical than I expected." He meant I wasn't glamorous, that I wore the same silver necklace I'd worn for decades, the one Rachel made in 8th grade with her initials carved into a tiny metal charm. I never stopped wearing it, but I could feel how far I'd been pushed away from her. It wasn't an explosion. It was quiet, a fading. At the engagement dinner, I tried to give a toast. Jason interrupted halfway through to tell a story about how I once got confused by an Uber app. Everyone laughed. I forced a smile. My voice cracked. Rachel didn't notice. She used to beg me to braid her hair before school, sit on the floor while I told her stories. Now she asked me to stay quiet, to not wear my old watch, to let her friends' parents give the speeches. You already do so much, Mom. Just relax. Relax. I pulled my phone from my small black clutch. My hands were calm. My mind clear. Jason had come to me for help over a year ago. Said he needed investors. Told me his business was going to change the world. Rachel had looked at me with those wide eyes, so full of belief. She had asked me for a loan, not for herself, but for him. For their future. I gave everything I had saved. Quietly. No recognition. No agreement to be repaid. I wanted her to be happy, to believe in something. What I hadn't realized was that Jason thought that made me weak. He never read the fine print. But I did. I went into the app, tapped through the accounts. The money was still in my name. The investment rights, mine. Then I heard him. Jason, a few feet away, his voice loud, laughing. This place cost a fortune. Thank goodness Rachel's mom has deep pockets and no backbone. That stopped me cold. No backbone. It echoed in my ears, clearer than the string quartet. It reminded me of the last conversation I had with my mother years ago, before she passed. Don't let people use your kindness to silence you, she'd said. Some will mistake sacrifice for weakness. Don't let them. I hadn't thought of that moment in so long, but suddenly I could feel her voice settle deep in my chest. I tapped, freeze account. A soft notification appeared on the screen. Done. I stood, not in a rush, not in anger, in resolve. The air felt cooler near the stage. I walked to the microphone where people had been offering glowing toasts all evening. Someone saw me and handed it over without question. I faced the room. The lights warmed my skin. Conversations dipped into silence. Good evening, I said. I'm Rachel's mother. There were smiles, nods, polite curiosity. I paid for this wedding. Every candle, every flower, every glass of wine. A few light chuckles. I didn't laugh. I was called a beggar today. I had cake wiped on my face, and I was laughed at. Now the air changed. Eyes shifted. By the groom. And my daughter said nothing. I let that land. Jason took a step forward. Rachel stood frozen. What many of you don't know is I'm the primary investor in Jason's business. Every cent came from me. Gasps. Whispering. And as of this evening, I have frozen those accounts. A hush fell. This is not revenge. This is clarity. You do not get to call me weak. You do not get to erase me and still cash my checks. I looked at Rachel. I gave everything I had so you could stand where you are. But I will not sacrifice my dignity to keep you comfortable. Not anymore. I set the microphone down. Silence. And I walked out. The doors closed behind me. Outside, the sky had turned a deep navy blue, the stars bright and clean. A breeze moved across the garden, carrying the soft scent of lavender. The marble under my heels felt firm, solid. For the first time in years, I walked without apologizing for my presence. And it felt good, not because I had one, but because I had finally remembered who I was. The morning after the wedding, the calls began. First from Rachel. then from Jason, then from numbers I didn't recognize. Some local, some out of state. They poured in like clockwork, beginning just after dawn. I let them ring. Outside, the sun was climbing through a layer of pale clouds, spilling a soft gold across my kitchen walls. I sat by the window, cradling a chipped ceramic mug in both hands. The steam curled slowly upward. My coffee had gone lukewarm, but I wasn't drinking it for warmth. I was holding it like a memory. Rachel had painted this mug in kindergarten, a clumsy rainbow and her name written backwards in bright blue. The glaze had cracked over time, but the words were still there. I stared through the glass. The garden outside was overgrown, in the way that only late summer gardens can be. Wild lavender spilled onto the walkway. The air smelled of wet soil and fading blossoms. These moved slowly in the cool morning, their wings humming as they passed the open window. Inside, the silence wrapped around me like a soft, heavy blanket. The kind you don't want to take off. Not because it's comforting, but because it shields you. I didn't return a single call. They weren't reaching out because they regretted what happened. They were reaching out because they had something to lose. By noon, my voicemail was full. Jason's voice was first. Slightly out of breath, forced. Let's not do this. It's a misunderstanding. We should talk like adults. This can still be fixed. Fixed. As if I were a plumbing issue. A loose screw. Something to tighten and forget. Rachel's message came next. Softer. Mom, please call me. I didn't mean to hurt you. We need to talk. We. Always we. A shared blame. A diluted truth. But I remembered clearly. I remembered Jason's words, the curve of his smirk, the cake, the laughter. And I remembered her face frozen for a moment, then smiling again, like nothing had happened. I stepped out into the garden with my second cup of coffee. The pathstones were still cool under my slippers. A breeze moved through the fig tree, brushing its wide leaves against the fence. I bent and pulled a few weeds near the rose bush, my knees aching slightly as I stood. Rachel used to help me in this garden. She would toddle beside me with her tiny plastic shovel, digging where she shouldn't. She once planted jelly beans, convinced they would grow into candy trees. Now she had stood by and watched me get humiliated, and called it a misunderstanding. By day 3, the tone changed. The panic was no longer masked. Jason left a voice message that was clipped and sharp. This isn't just about you. You're affecting our lives, our future. You can't hold on to this. Rachel's messages came every few hours. Please stop. You're tearing everything apart. That one stayed with me, because they had already torn me apart. In slow, invisible ways. Over years. With dismissive jokes, quiet betrayals, and expectations that I would keep giving even as they stopped seeing me. Now that I had said no just once, suddenly I was the one causing the damage? I paid for that wedding. Every chair, every plate, every flower arrangement. I funded Jason's business. I gave up my own financial security for the promise that she would be happy. But that day, I saw what they had felt on my back. And I walked away. Day 4. Early afternoon. I heard a car pull into the driveway. I was in the kitchen, washing a bowl. The sound of tires on gravel snapped something inside me. I turned off the water and stood still, listening. Then came the knock. 3 soft raps on the front door. I dried my hands slowly. No rush. Through the peephole, I saw her. Rachel. She was wearing a gray hoodie, no makeup, her hair tied back messily. She looked tired. Not broken. Just worn. I opened the door but didn't step aside. She took a shaky breath. Mom, please. Can we talk? I said nothing. Her eyes searched mine. I didn't think it would go that far. Jason was just joking. We thought you were okay. That sentence lit something deep in my chest. Something like anger, but colder. I thought you were okay. Like my silence had been permission. Like my stillness had been approval. I didn't mean to humiliate you, she said. We just got caught up in the moment. You know how he is. Yes, I did. And I knew how she was when she didn't speak up. When she let herself believe that comfort was more important than respect. She stepped forward. Why are you being like this? Because for once, I was not going to make it easier for her to forget what she did. She began to cry. The kind of tears I had seen before, the ones meant to patch things quickly. I waited. I watched. Then I gently closed the door. Not a slam, not a shout, just a quiet, final closing. She stayed on the porch for a while. I heard her sit down. Then eventually, her car started and she drove away. That evening, I made tea. The scent of mint filled the small kitchen. I wrapped myself in a knit shawl and stepped out onto the porch. The wind had picked up slightly. The air smelled of dry earth and the last warmth of summer. The stars had just begun to appear one by one. Inside, my phone buzzed again. I left it on the counter. I sipped slowly. I had no need to explain. I had no wish to argue. They could keep calling. But I was done answering. And for the first time in a very long while, I felt steady. A week passed. Then another. The phone stopped ringing. Not because everything was fine, but because silence became my answer. And silence, when chosen, not forced, is power. The house felt different now. Not just quiet, but clean. Uncluttered. The air felt easier to breathe, like someone had opened a window I didn't know had been sealed shut for years. Even the ticking of the kitchen clock seemed calmer, each second stretching into stillness I welcomed. Every morning, sunlight came through the east window, casting long golden streaks across the kitchen floor. Dust motes floated like tiny ghosts in the beans. I watched them while I drank coffee from the same cracked mug, Rachel's first Mother's Day gift. A rainbow that had faded, a smiley face nearly rubbed away, but the heart she painted underneath still visible. I didn't touch my phone, not out of spite, but because I didn't want any more. I swept the floors, tended to the garden, cleaned out drawers that hadn't been opened in years. There was something healing in sorting things by hand, in putting away what no longer served me. I found old drawings Rachel had made in grade school, one of us holding hands, stick figure smiles, a sun with too many rays. I pressed it flat and slid it into a new frame. Some things you save, some things you let go. On the 10th day, a letter arrived. The envelope was light blue. Her handwriting hadn't changed, soft curves, wide loops, just like the notes she used to leave on the fridge in high school. Mom, I wish I could undo what happened. I see it now. I see how many moments I ignored. How many times I let Jason speak without stopping him. I thought if I didn't say anything, it would pass. But it didn't. It stayed with you. I was scared of ruining the day, but I ended up ruining something more important. I understand if you don't want to talk, but I love you. I always have. Love, Rachel. There was no apology from Jason, and that told me everything. I folded the letter and placed it gently in a drawer beside old birthday cards, faded photos, and Rachel's baby hospital bracelet. Not to forget, but not to dwell. A few days later, an email found me. Subject, you don't know me, but I saw. It was from a woman I didn't know, a guest from the wedding. She had been seated on the groom's side. I saw what happened. I didn't say anything that night, and I've regretted it ever since. I just wanted to tell you that your voice mattered. The way you stood up for yourself? That stayed with me. You reminded me that silence isn't always noble. Sometimes it's just fear. And I'm tired of being afraid. Her words sat with me longer than she probably intended. I read them again before bed that night. And in the morning, I printed it and tucked it into my journal. Because sometimes the kindness of a stranger means more than the rehearsed regret of those who once claimed to love you. I didn't reply to Rachel's letter. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some wounds don't close with words. They close with time, with distance, with finally being allowed to feel the hurt all the way through without someone asking you to hurry past it. I went for long walks, past the same old oak trees, past the park she used to play in. There, I saw a little girl running toward her father, arms wide. He lifted her with ease and spun her in a circle, both laughing like it was the only thing that mattered. I smiled, but it ached, because once, that was me and Rachel. I used to be her whole world. And somehow, over the years, I had agreed to become smaller, more convenient, a helper in the background, until I didn't. And when I refused to stay in that role, they called me difficult, cold, vindictive. But I wasn't any of those things. I was just done. Done being overlooked. Done shrinking myself for others. Done watching my kindness be rewritten as weakness. One afternoon, I passed the bookshelf and saw the framed photo they had mailed before the wedding. Jason and Rachel, smiling in coordinated outfits, a caption printed beneath it, "The beginning of forever." I stared at it for a long time. Then, without drama, I took it down. I wrapped it in newspaper and placed it gently in a box. Not out of bitterness, out of release. I cleaned the shelf, dusted it with a soft cloth, placed a small vase of lavender there instead. The light hit it perfectly. And for the first time in years, I felt a peace that wasn't fragile. It wasn't something I had to earn or beg to keep. It was mine, built by boundaries I had waited too long to set. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees, a fresh cup of tea in my hands. The sky was painted with purples and fading orange. A soft wind rustled the wind chimes near the door. The air smelled like pine and warm earth. I watched the last bit of light disappear behind the hills. My phone buzzed inside. I didn't check it, not because I was angry, but because I no longer needed to be available just to prove I cared. Somewhere inside, the ache still lived, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It was manageable, familiar, like a scar that only hurts when you press on it too hard. I leaned back and closed my eyes, and I whispered something to the night. I did the right thing. Because I had. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I remembered I mattered. And if you've ever felt like you don't belong, you're not alone. If you've ever stayed silent to keep the peace, you're allowed to speak. Even if your voice shakes. Even if you speak by walking away. And if you think age means weakness, it doesn't. It means dignity. It means finally choosing yourself without apology.